Hi, this is Lou Rosenfeld, and you're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. Today is June 12th, 2015, and I'm talking with Laura Klein. Laura you may already know pretty well. She wrote a fantastic book for O'Reilly and Eric Ries's Lean series called UX for Lean Startups. And I liked her work so much that I convinced her to write a book for Rosenfeld Media, which at least is tentatively called Build Better Products. We'll talk about that in a moment. I wanted to talk with you today, Laura, because in recent conversations we've had, you were really animated by a concept that I had absolutely never heard of, which is called design for growth. What is this design for growth thing?
So, have you heard of growth hacking and growth hackers?
Yeah, I don't think I know enough about them. I have no first-hand experience. It'd be good to frame it with a little explanation, a little more broadly, what it's about.
Sure. So I ran into growth hacking, I guess, a few years ago. Sean Ellis came up with the term, and I spoke at the Growth Hacker Conference. About a year and a half ago now, and I went in and they asked me to speak, and I said, well, I'm not a growth hacker. I mean, I'm not. Growth hackers are really they're people who understand both marketing and engineering. Generally speaking, sometimes there are people who are just really good at sort of online marketing. And the whole idea is that there's this really fast iteration cycle of testing and trying new things and seeing what drives new growth and seeing what really makes products viral, and really getting your user base, to go up and to the right very quickly. And they combine a lot of quantitative measurement, which I'm a fan of, as you may know if you've read the book. And they, and a lot of sort of user psychology and trying to figure out, and the stereotype of the growth hacker is, what if we put the button over here, and oh, look, we got a 30% increase in acquisition, and that's fine. They do that. So they asked me to speak at the conference, and I said, I don't really know anything about growth hacking. And they said, well, so the thing is that it's really a lot easier to growth hack or to just grow a good product that people can actually use. So, we'd like you to talk about the stuff that you talk about, which is, understanding users. And so I did a talk called The 3 Reasons Your Users Don't Convert. And in it, I gave them ways to figure out why people are coming to your site and then, not actually becoming users of it. And just some basic research techniques for figuring that out. Because what I came to realize was that while I'm a big fan of the quantitative measurement, that the one thing that some growth hackers are missing, not all of them, I think the more enlightened ones get this, the one thing that some growth hackers are missing is this real connection to the user, right? There's this real connection to the user and understanding the user and generating better ideas for experiments by, talking to people, by doing good design. And I also realized that designers often, I don't want to massively stereotype, but here goes, designers will often really concentrate very much on designing a fabulous, usable, useful product. Hooray, that's great. But they don't necessarily think about where are the people going to come from who are going to use my product? And how am I going to make sure that, my user base really grows? I mean, and I think that, and I've certainly been guilty of this, I think a lot of us can end up designing a wonderful product that is deeply loved by a couple of dozen people. And that's not something that we want because, we'd like to stay in business. So I'm trying to, so the Design for Growth, I'm going to teach a class in it. The class is about teaching designers, specifically UX designers and product managers, what they need to know about growth and growth hacking, not turning them into growth hackers. I don't want them to necessarily go out and, that I'm not going to turn everybody into, marketing experts. I just want them to know enough about it so that they can start to think about where are my users coming from? How am I acquiring them? How do I really focus on, my ideal customer? How do I, track which channels are working best? How do I convert people? And how do I think about getting them to invite their friends or to talk about my product? And building that into the whole core loop of the product. So, I mean, not all products are going to be Facebook. Not everything needs to be social. I don't necessarily want to, tell all of my friends about, the new SaaS productivity app that I'm using. It does, I don't need to invite my friends to make that more fun. So what are some ways that we can grow different kinds of businesses? Yeah, where do those users come from so that we can actually have some and survive as a company?
It's interesting. First of all, this is really fantastic that you're pushing into this direction. I mean, I think you're right. Just as we on the design side are often bitching and moaning about whatever group doesn't really understand or appreciate what we do, maybe some of the growth hackers aren't quite in tune with the value that we bring. And so the converse is often true. And we often tend to forget that there's a broader context that our products live in. By the way, some of the books that speak to this are Andy Young's Mental Models and Sherry Tharrell's work. I don't know if these are in line with what you're talking about, or are you looking at a different set of methods to get people at a different point?
So the second one, the thinking about SEM and SEO, absolutely, very much so. All of the designers who are talking about things like, writing good copy and copy that converts and how copy is part of the user experience, absolutely that. The mental model, Indy's mental models, which is fabulous, I actually kind of wish that growth hackers would read things like that as opposed to that teaching designers about growth hacking. I think it's sort of the opposite, because the fact is, anytime that you're thinking about, how to fit your product into the user's life and how to, basically you're looking at increasing retention. And as any good growth hacker will tell you, retention is a huge part of growth because you can acquire a whole lot of new users, and if they all leave immediately, you don't get any growth. You just spend a lot of money. So I think that, I don't think that a lot of this is going to be brand new to designers. I think it is going to give them some of the terminology and some, frankly, jargon, but also giving them some new things to think about when they're doing the thing that they do so well, which is designing a great product. It'll just also give them, something to think about with, okay, well, you're not just going to design a great product, you're going to design a product that is going to be more likely to be shared by the users, right? And that's a little different. You can design something that people love, but you don't necessarily prioritize making it shareable, right? Because that's not necessary. And I really want to think about, I want designers in this space, because I don't want growth hacking to turn into something that really is hacky. Like, I don't want it to turn into, growth at any cost, and especially not growth at the cost of the user experience. I think that we can design great things that grow naturally if we all work together on it. And what I was going to say is, you said that often we bitch and moan about people not not respecting what we do. How often have you heard designers talk about, marketing? Like, sometimes UX designers not the biggest fans of having to deal with marketing because they really see it as at odds. And I'm seeing it as they can be incredibly helpful, and we can be incredibly helpful to them. Anyway, I want to make this growth thing not entirely marketing's problem anymore. I want it to be a joint effort.
So what are the fundamentals here? Is it looking at personas differently? Is it rejiggering field studies? Is it something else?
I think we start by getting designers to have a vocabulary around quantitative metrics. We have got to get comfortable with measuring. And I still run into designers who are really uncomfortable with that concept and who are, saying, oh, it can't be measured, and, design can't be measured, and the wow factor can't be measured. Yes, it can. We need to understand what that means, and we need to push to measure it well, so that we're actually looking at positive impacts on the user experience when we're measuring. But that's the first step, is understanding the user funnel, understanding the user life cycle. And the other thing that it's really about is thinking about acquisition of new users as we are designing new features. And yes, I mean, definitely asking slightly different questions in field studies, or adding some questions. One of my favorite ones to ask, which I almost never hear UX designers ask, is where did you hear about this product? Because understanding not just who our user is, but who their influencers are and where they make product decisions can make a big difference when you're designing features that are specifically designed to acquire new users. So it's not always just about designing the same referral program that everybody has. It's being a little bit creative with figuring out, our users actually, they hang out on Snapchat, or they get all of their info, they make all of their buying decisions from, people on Twitter, or, they find all of their products on Pinterest. How can we take advantage of that? How can we share with them there? How can we make that part of the sort of natural process of using the product?
Interesting that you started your answer with coming up with a common or shared vocabulary. The shared vocabulary needs to go a bit more broadly. The whole point of a shared vocabulary is to help people have conversations that are more productive. Doesn't it have to be a vocabulary that isn't just quantitative, but really more about experience in a broader sense?
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. In this particular context, I'm trying to teach designers the side of it that I have found that many of them are lacking, which seems to be the quant side. At some point, I would also love to work with marketers and sales folks and growth hackers. And I've actually done some of that to try to teach them about the qualitative and how they can improve their experiments by developing better hypotheses. It's so funny. I was talking to this really young growth hacker, and he was great, and he was really excited about growth hacking. And he was we're running all these experiments, and it's fantastic. And we just come up with these ideas, and then we experiment, and then we see which one wins, and then we go with that. And I'm like, if you talk to a human being once in a while, more of your experiments would do better because you would have better ideas. And he wasn't quite there yet. He hadn't grasped that yet. If you talk to the senior folks who have been doing this for a little bit longer, who sort of came up with the idea, they're like, oh yeah. No, it's all about, like, we absolutely do qualitative. We absolutely understand what users think. Salespeople will often refer to the ideal customer, whereas UX designers will often refer to personas, and they're very similar. They're not exactly the same, but they're very similar, and we can certainly have a conversation. Like, once we start realizing that these are very similar concepts, we can have a conversation about that.
So it's interesting. We kind of need to have a holder of the Rosetta Stone within these organizations. Someone needs to take on the mantle of Babelfish or translator. And it really does seem increasingly apparent that this has to be the product manager.
Yeah. And we're seeing a lot more growth product managers, at least out here. I know like LinkedIn and Twitter have had growth teams for years. I was just reading an Ask Me Anything by the woman who is a product manager in charge of growth at BitTorrent. It was really interesting, and she was saying that they put growth and product in the same organization because they're really the same thing. And I actually like that. I like that growth is sort of a part of product, or that. And I've worked on teams where it was sort of divided up that way, so that there was sort of growth in the context of the product, and there's always a product manager. We're starting to see designers on growth teams, which is good. It's just that at some companies, we're starting to see these teams grow up that have these cross-functional teams, and it's like, okay, your job is to make our user base number go up and to the right. You need to drive more of the right kind of user into our product. Go. And there'll be a product manager who's in charge of, coordinating everything and looking at they may be looking at some of the quant, and they may be doing some of the qual. The designers are, helping to figure out what the right experiments to run are. And the engineers are very quickly building and making sure that everything can be tested. It's great. It's often like a little startup within larger companies typically.
Yeah, and to bring it full circle, that's why I'm excited that you're taking on this book. I mean, excited for the scope and the potential of the book. I don't really feel like there's a there yet with product management. It's not really the canon of, there's not really a canon of tools yet. It feels like it's really still quite nascent.
There's not even a common way of like interviewing them. I mean, have you ever noticed this? That, with engineers, like there's, because I've worked as an engineer, right? And I've been through the coding challenges, and they're not all great. Like a lot of them are kind of stupid and aren't fantastic. But basically, if you're going to be an engineer, at some point, they're going to test you to see if you can code, right? And if you're going to be a designer, generally they're going to ask to see some sort of portfolio, or they're going to have you design something with them, or you're going to do a whiteboard test or something. Product management, the way that we evaluate and interview product managers is far more scattered than either of those two things. And even and I know that as a designer, it's very weird to say that the definition of product management is very scattered, because of course designer can mean any one of 1,000 different things. But product managers at at large companies, really, like, the job is entirely different than product managers at startups often. And at different companies, the job will be very different. And I've just met product managers that are just of wildly different, let's say, skill levels. That I have worked with a few outstanding product managers, and I have worked with some people who I just don't even know what they did. And I don't think they knew what they did either.
So what makes an outstanding product manager?
That is an excellent question. And I think being an outstanding product manager is just an incredibly hard job. I think it's amazingly hard. I think that to be a great product manager, you have to know both your product and your user better than anyone else in the entire world. And to do that, you're going to use quant, you're going to use qual, you're going to use divination. I don't know. There are a lot of tools that you're going to use. I don't think that it's any specific. I don't think it's necessarily like a very small set of skills. I think it's this very wide set of skills that you need to have. But you need to have this really unbelievable understanding of both your product and your user and your business. That's the other thing. And you really have to understand what's going to make your business successful. And you have to be able to put all of that together and do all of the coordination to make it happen. So that's a lot of skills.
Also a lot of chutzpah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that many of the product managers that I've met with who maybe weren't so great had a lot of that last one, had a lot of chutzpah, and not a lot of the other three. Yeah. Or they tended to be, very, very good at one of the other three. They really understood the product, but they didn't get the user or the business, or, it's tough.
Well, I'm hopeful that your book will help move this along. It's a tall order, but it's really what businesses are going to need to succeed, and hopefully they'll have your book in their hands.
I hope that very much too. I would very much like that to be what the book does, and to be in the hands of every product manager out there.
Well, thanks, Laura. Great talking with you.
Thanks so much. It was great to talk to you. Bye-bye.